Well, welcome to another episode of Alliance Insights. Today we're joined by Rebecca Barens, CIC and president of Willow Insurance Group, here to talk to us about her career and some insights for producers. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Pretty good. I always am better when I get to jump on and do an interview like this. I've heard a lot about you, but this is the first time we're meeting, so pretty awesome to have conversations with impressive insurance folks. So
Well,
thank you.
thanks. Thank you.
Rebecca, tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry, your journey to president of Willow Insurance, and what you like about being a producer.
So I was in banking for a long time, and the bank paid for me to get master's degrees. So thought that was probably a good thing to have. So I took a class while getting my MBA in insurance, and I liked it way better than banking. So my dad had a friend who owned an agency, and I asked if he would hire me, and he said no. And so I just asked again. I kept asking because I thought I wanted a job in insurance. And so finally he said yes. So I had no experience. I mean, that's why I said no. So I got my first job and had to get licensed. I knew nothing. So I took probably about a year to kind of learn what insurance was because I knew what auto insurance was. That was all I knew. And I worked as a commercial producer. I sold pretty much nothing because didn't know what I was doing. There was another agent there who did a lot of the marketing, and so she taught me everything she knew. I still talk to her to this day, and she kind of took me under her wing. And so for a couple of years, I worked there, but I was a starving artist. So finally, I found another agency who would send me to a producer school because I, at that point, knew what insurance was, but couldn't get anyone to buy it from me. So I told my existing boss, I have this opportunity to go to a producer school, and he was encouraging and told me I should do it. So I took a job at a new agency and went through a producer school that State Auto had at the time called Pacesetter, and finally learned how to sell insurance. And I worked there for a few years and thought I could probably do it myself as an agency owner. And so after a couple of years of working there and actually figuring out how to sell insurance, then I went out on my own and started an agency, which in hindsight, like I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't, I had no carriers or anything of the sort. So it was a real leap of faith, I would say. But I went out on my own in 2016. And then subsequently, I have been an agent and an agency owner ever since. And what I love, it's always something new. Every day there's a new person to meet, a new risk to try and figure out, a new claim to kind of unravel. So it's always something different every day, which I like. For me, that's important. I don't mind sitting at a desk, but I don't want to just do the same thing every single day. And I love the flexibility that it gives me. I have a family now. When I started, I didn't, but now I do. So, if my daughter needs to be picked up from gymnastics, I can run out, pick her up, take her home, whatever. But I have that flexibility to be able to live a life and also have a career that is interesting every day.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you were just like, oh, I can do this. And I went out and did it, but I had no clients. And I think,
No.
That type of, that courage, that motivation for, young people who are in high school or college, like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. So I'm not going to go into one of these other, well, that's what you were, right? You had that
Right.
motivation, that sense of, that you could do it. I love that. So you had to build a client base, which I can't imagine is, I don't know, it scares me thinking about it, right? So I
Yeah.
can understand, or I can't understand because I didn't do it. But like, how do you What tools did you use? Like, how did you build your visibility? Do you use LinkedIn, or is there other things? Has that changed from 2016 to now? Like, what, yeah. So what are you using, or what did you use?
So I would say since 2016, and when I started in the industry, back before that, it's changed a lot. Back when I started, I think the internet was, people used it for sure. LinkedIn, a little bit or whatever. I would say one of the biggest advances is using Zoom. I used to drive all over the place, and now I have clients all over the place. Actually, I have a client in Texas. I've never met him. So I would say that is a big shift for me personally, is just the ability to write insurance. I figured out what I like to write, and I figured out what I'm good at writing, and I kind of just stick to that. But that limits you in some ways, because I there's a very niche that I prefer. But the unlimiting part is that I have the ability to write people in Texas or in Florida if I want. So I'm not as limited by geography. I do use LinkedIn a little. I used it a lot more in the beginning of my career because I had no clients to work with. So I was just kind of grasping at straws of, like, who will take the stuff I want to sell them. um,
Yeah.
and and now, I have the flexibility a little more to not have to rely quite so heavily on LinkedIn. I do use it now to find um, businesses within the industries that I'm interested in, um, and people who may know other people, because really the way I figured out that I can have a highly referral based successful agency is to work with people who refer me people. And so
Mhm.
that's really what I focus on. And so I use LinkedIn to try and find people who might know other people. Um, but a lot less now, just because I think that LinkedIn in the beginning years was very much, you were only friends with the people that you were friends with, kind of thing. Like, you didn't
Yeah.
just add everybody. And now I feel like people kind of just add everybody that they sort of kind of know. And really what I'm looking for is a really warm referral of somebody that, they're the person that I'm working with right now, that I was working on this morning before this call, is actually a cousin of another guy that I write. So
Oh,
I
okay.
found that I'm a lot more successful with getting really warm referrals. Once I get the name and the person, I can do the rest.
Right.
So he actually gave me his cousin because it was a home policy, but now I'm writing all of his other stuff, and I'm a lot more successful that way. So I don't rely as much on LinkedIn as I did in the beginning of my career when I didn't know anybody. Um,
Yeah.
and for sure, when I didn't know anybody, I relied on it heavily because I was just looking for anything. But now my closing ratio is a lot higher too, because I'm working off of referrals. Whereas when I was working off of LinkedIn, it was that sales
Yeah.
process is a lot longer, and it's
Mhm.
not as always as successful.
So you mentioned too that you also realized what you were good at writing. Like,
Yes.
how did you, was it a stumble upon what you were good at writing, or you just kind of knew, you kind of figured it out by the clients that were coming in? Is what you're good at writing, um, all these multi-part questions, is
Yeah,
what
right.
you're good at writing, is that because you have a lot of interest in that area as well as, like, as opposed to, like, say maybe another line of business or another product that maybe doesn't interest you as much? Like, is it your passion?
Right. Um, I figured out what I don't like writing. I think the answer to the question is like, what do I really hate? And so what I really don't like is stuff that's a lot of work, not a lot of money, and it high cancellation rate. So like they're very likely to cancel. Uh, do we have some of that? Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But I figured out the industries that are more likely to do that, and that's the stuff I kind of steer away from. The stuff that I like to write is more complicated. I like I like very high injury. Prone to injury is something that I'm interested in, because those are the types of clients that rely on you and your expertise a lot more heavily than somebody that could just go online and replace you with an online policy. So I tend to write stuff that maybe isn't huge. I have friends that write huge accounts, and that isn't me necessarily, but I do prefer people that are going to need my expertise, that where I can rely on the fact that I have a CIC and I've read all the policies, so I know what's covered and what's not, and how to
Mhm.
kind of navigate through their insurance program as a whole. So that's kind of how I figured it out. I think, one of the industries that I like is staffing because it's complicated. There's tons of different coverages. It's not easily accessible. Like you can't just go online and buy your own thing because it's complicated.
Right.
And there's more to it than just going and getting a BOP. So that kind of thing is what I am interested in. And just having a little bit better relationship with my clients, because the other fact is that there's other agents out there that would love to have my book of business and take everything away from me. So trying to provide excellent customer service and being an expert in the field that I've chosen, and just being kind of the go-to whenever there's a question or a problem, that's the kind of client that I want. So is it an industry specific? Not necessarily, but it's somebody that's really going to rely on my knowledge base and treat me as one of their resources. That's the kind of client I want.
And I suppose just listening to you talk, that's the type of mindset that builds client trust, right?
Right.
And so you're more likely to get those warm referrals because you've really helped some complicated businesses or complicated situations figure out a product that you know very well
Right.
and are really far into them. So what else helps build kind of client relationships or client trust?
I thought a little bit about, obviously looking through kind of what the direction of the questions were going to be. I looked through that and I really thought about like how do I differentiate what I do from what everyone else does, and how do I build like value and trust? And I think one of the things is that I try and be accessible. I'm not always perfect. And, you can get a really slippery slope where it's like, wow, you told me you were always going to be available. And I called you on the 4th of July. You weren't around. But I will say somebody did call me on the 4th of July and I answered. So,
Yeah.
and I fixed their problem. They had a massive issue and I drove to Starbucks with my laptop and I fixed it. But setting up that value in the beginning and saying this is what the differentiator is, and by the way, that's the client who referred me his cousin that I was working on this morning, and the reason why is because I am a valuable asset to him, and he, the understanding is don't call me on 4th of July unless it's really an emergency, like
Yeah.
we really,
Let me know after Thanksgiving if you get a call from that guy.
I know this better really be worth it. He did call me. I was
Yeah.
out of the country, and he called me too. And he was like, sometimes you're really hard to get a hold of. And I was like, I'm literally not. I'm on the other side of the globe.
Yeah.
But making sure that they know that I am there for them and I am an asset. I mean, I think that builds great trust. The other
Yeah.
thing that I really work hard at is education. So going back to like having a CIC and having that expertise and that educational background on what is in the policy, not only just knowing that for myself because that's like good information to know, but also to make sure that the clients that you're working with understand what in the world they're buying, because they don't understand it and they think it's a lot of money and they don't even know what they're paying for. It doesn't have to be a huge, long, drawn conversation. I could go on and on about insurance and nobody wants to listen to it, but making sure that they understand that the reason why you're paying for this is for this. And by the way, you're paying for this other thing. And I'm questioning whether you need it. We have a lot of people that have they'll have no cyber and they have a million computers. And you're like, okay, you probably need that. Or they have cyber coverage and not a laptop. And it's like, they don't even have email.
Right.
So just making sure that they understand what they're paying for and why it's important to have, or maybe, hey, I'd rather you have a higher deductible, but cover the buildings right. Like, I'd rather you do this and
Right.
save money over here than, maybe do a different avenue. I think that makes them feel like you're really listening and valuing the fact that, that is expensive and it's a lot of money. So their wallet is in the back of your
Yeah.
mind.
So it sounds like too that, just the transparency with the clients is, critical. I can imagine that it would be easy to feel like you could, not, you know, that sometimes it might be a difficult conversation to give to a client, but the transparency on what you're doing and what you're providing, even if it comes at a higher cost or with more coverage, is very important. Which is one of my favorite things about the industry. Despite the bad rap that we might get publicly, it is an industry of high integrity and an effort for high integrity. Um, what are there any other tips? Because you talked about some of the things you do with your clients, but tips you have for listeners who maybe are just getting started, thinking about doing their own agency that may help them demonstrate their expertise.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I think first of all, I would say to any new producer or agency owner, principal, I think you have to just have a lot of tenacity. You have to really just keep going. And, even when you think, I heard somebody say once that you never have, as a business owner, and I think the same is true as a producer, you never have two good days in a row. A lot of times I go moment by moment where I get a good phone call and a bad phone call. That happened to me yesterday where I had a good phone call and it was immediately followed up with my phone was ringing while I had the good phone call and it was with somebody that had bad news. And so I think that you just have to keep pressing on. If it's an industry that you love, and I think that there's a lot of reasons to love it, there's a lot of amazing people that I encounter. I help people. I There's a lot of things that I really love about my job. That's all the good. And you
yeah,
have to sometimes just weather the storm and there's a lot of them. And even when you are having a great successful year, there's going to be hiccups and I think you just have to keep pressing on. And that's true of a new producer, that's true of an agency owner. um I've weathered many years of being an agency owner and a producer, and there are years that are great and there are years that are rough,
yeah.
and you just have to keep on going and have just the wherewithal to know that you're making a difference and that you're doing good things, and the rest will work itself out.
Yeah, I love that, and um, certainly I think is helpful for when people are feeling down. Go back to that Rebecca comment, the tenacity. It really gets you through a lot more, and to realize that others have been through this. You mentioned earlier in the discussion that someone recommended producer training. And I know we have some good friends, Diane and Ken at Elite Training and Consulting. They also do producer training. Is it something that, or uh, is it something that you would recommend to someone listening to this that's thinking about being a producer? And at what point in that thought about becoming a producer do you recommend getting in with Ken and Diane?
I worked with Ken in 2014, maybe that's aging me. And it was a total difference maker for me. I know both of them very well. I've worked alongside of them. I've spoken at their various conferences for years. And the reason why I do it is not just because I like Ken and Diane, which is true, I do, but it's because it was an absolute game changer for my career. So prior to, and I kind of alluded to it, I was very good at quoting and I was horrible at actually getting a policy bound. I could quote all day and I could uh, not ever get a credit card kind of thing. Um, for me, the difference between my sales, and I track everything, and the difference between my sales success prior to meeting Ken and Diane and after meeting Ken and Diane was a total 180. So yes, do I recommend that you work with them, an expert in the field, somebody that can really help catapult your career from mid-level success, which I wouldn't even say I had, but like mid-level success to just catapulting you into the next echelon, yes, I think 100% they are experts in the field and they revolutionized me, myself, my career. When do you do it? I think when you're ready to actually buckle down, because they're successful with me and with my career because I was willing to put in the effort and do what they said. So when you're ready to make that change within your own career and you're really ready to put in the hard effort and the work that it requires to be successful, that's when I would say you could do it. For me, it took a couple of years. I knew insurance, but it took a couple of years of me just getting beat up to figure out I need somebody that knows how to like sell this stuff, who can tell me
Right.
what I'm doing wrong. Um, and really, in the end, I don't know that I was doing anything wrong, but I think that they changed my focus a little bit, and it's and okay, well, what are you going after, and how are you doing it? So, it wasn't huge changes that I was like missing the mark. It was a focus change, and it was,
Wow.
this is what you can do to be successful. And it was an outside perspective of somebody looking at what I was doing. And here's like a couple little changes that you can make. And the other great thing is that it's a check-in process. So it's having some accountability, because the other thing about being a producer, there's tons of freedom, but that's good and that's bad. The bad is that there's tons of freedom. And so, if you don't have an accountability partner to tell you, hey, by the way, are you really doing everything that you should be doing on a daily basis? And I still talk to Ken. There are weeks where I am not doing what I need to do. Even now, years later, there are some weeks when I am not doing what I need to do, and that impacts your future success. So the fact that I'm not doing everything that I should be doing now is going to impact me in 3 months. So having that constant accountability is imperative, because they're going to keep you on track. They're going to show you how to be successful, but that impacts you not even really today. It's like your future success. So yes, 100%, I would highly recommend having them as coaches to help you figure out what you need to do to be successful. And I think as soon as you're ready to put in the work, they're ready to work for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love hearing great stories like that because it's really, you know, you, it's not shameful to need help, right? That's how we all survive here. We all have different skill sets, and there are lots of folks in this industry who have really, built careers and success, and they want to share. They want to be able to pass that on, and it's been one of my favorite things, in
Yeah.
the industry for sure. Um, One more really like question about just kind of what you build and how you are. So you mentioned in the beginning not having any carrier relationships to start, which giant leap, right? You need
Yeah.
you need those. So how did you do that? Like, how did you build your carrier relationships? Are there tips or that you want to share? Um, are some nicer than others? No, don't answer that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the beginning, I did know Ken, who at the time worked for a carrier that, is not even, they're new now. They've been bought and merged and whatever. That was kind of it. Like I had one person, I didn't have a lot of friends. Um, because I had always been a producer. So I had that kind of wall between myself and like who was actually marketing my accounts. So I just didn't have a lot of relationships. I ended up actually going to a, uh, it's an aggregator, for lack of a better word, called Curry. They're out of Wisconsin. And I met with them. I don't even know if maybe you can cut this, but I met with them, and I was so nervous. I actually threw up in the airport
Oh, geez.
because I didn't have anything. I had no career. I was like, I just had this like dream and ambition. And I flew out to see them. They are in Wisconsin. So I flew from Detroit to Wisconsin and puked in the airport, and then went and met with them. And they brought with him some carrier appointments, just some, which is really all I needed. I just needed a few, I don't need to, but really I was looking for a couple of specific ones. They had the few specific ones that I was looking for. And then subsequently we've grown exponentially. So I rely on them a little less now that I'm bigger.
Mm.
However, in the beginning, you have to figure out the appointment situation, because it's a make or break. And just having one auto carrier is not going to build success. So you have to figure out, either you have relationships with carriers and you know that you do, or you don't, which was me.
Yeah.
And so I ended up signing on with them in 2016. And with that brought probably 10 appointments, which was enough to get me going. Subsequently, obviously, we've gotten them, carrier appointments on our own, and we aren't so heavily reliant. I actually still do have a relationship with Curry. We're still a Curry partner, because over the years they've helped me with negotiation that I wouldn't be able to do without them. So even though we've grown, I still do have that relationship. But I would say that if you are going out on your own, or you're even considering it, you better figure that out first before. I kind of half did that. I was, I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. And then I was like, oh, I should probably figure that out. Which is why I was so nervous, and I
Yeah.
threw up in the airport, because it was like, I didn't, it was this, or like my dream was dead. So I'd say before
It was
you,
probably the pilot, Rebecca. It was
I know,
probably the pilot.
I know. So you better figure that out first
Yeah.
before you just go out on your own and hang a shingle.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, now having the relationships is a lot easier. We have business with them, and people swing by here all the time. There's a guy that just kind of swings by on his way by, and that's the kind of relationships that we have with a lot of our partners. But that's a long time coming, and you
Yeah.
really have to be able to have a book of business. And a lot of producers that are like thinking about going out on their own, they're not going to have a book of business really to bring, which is fine. But then you need somebody that's going to give you a little bit of backing.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, probably donuts at the office don't hurt either,
Right,
right?
right. Yes. And snack box. We do have a snack
People would
box
make
back.
me stop by an office, but I'm also not a carrier and cannot provide any coverage for you. But
Right, right.
well, Rebecca, I think this conversation has been really awesome, and I took notes as we were going, which I often don't do, but I really loved a lot of the things you were saying because right, you enter this business with well tenacity yourself, not allowing anybody to say no that you wanted to work. Well, they said no until they said yes, right,
Yeah.
to give you a job. You have this like incredible entrepreneurial spirit that led you to create this agency, which I think is really important for young people who haven't decided on a career yet, or even some folks who have found their way into insurance that maybe they just haven't found the right fit. And this, what you're doing, your story will inspire them maybe to take that leap without their carrier partners and maybe with some Dramamine on their flight to meet some carrier
Yeah.
partners. Um, and you're not just transactional, right? That's what I got out of you're there, you're accessible, you give your clients expectations, but you set the bar high on being able to solve complicated scenarios for them, which at the end of the day, I feel like is like the crux of this industry, right? Is
Right.
like you're the living embodiment of how wonderful, um, and I use some pretty colorful words to describe the industry, how wonderful and exciting and great it is to be in the insurance industry, which the news outlets don't ever use.
Right.
And tenacity. The word is tenacity, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think this has been awesome. Any other things you would want to share besides all of that?
I think one of the questions that was written down was how does CIC, or the National Alliance,
Mhm.
like how did that impact your career? And I would say I thought a lot about that one too. I think what it provides, you're going to be the expert, you're going to be kind of the face of the insurance product, if you will, or whatever. But what is it? I don't know that my clients necessarily understand even what CIC is. I wouldn't
Sure.
say that. But what I do think that it provides, the National Alliance and CIC, I think what it provides is I understand and I know the product. Because I sat in those classes and I read through ISO forms, and we talk through claim scenarios, and you really do a deep dive into the product. And I can say with certainty that I understand how to read an ISO form and I understand what's in there. Your general consumer has never read an insurance policy. Your general, like, normal agent probably more than likely has not read through an entire insurance policy. But I can say I have, and I've been
Yeah.
tested on it, and I passed a bunch of tests. So I know what's in there. And that is a big difference maker because I understand how the insurance industry works, how coverage works. And so I'm able to put together not just a bot, because that's not my specialty. I'll do it, but that's not really what I focus on. I can put together an entire insurance program with vast knowledge and understanding of where stuff goes and why, and be able to explain that to a customer better than a lot of my competitors because I sat through those classes and I have a very clear knowledge of what it is that I'm selling. And
Yeah.
so, when you look back at my career from years ago to now, it's like, okay, I didn't know how to sell the product. And the other thing is, quite frankly, I didn't understand what the product was. So setting up with Ken and Diane, 100%. And setting up with the National Alliance and getting whatever credentialing that you need to be successful and understand what in the world it is you're doing, that's a big difference maker. And it's gonna set you apart from your competition because I know what I'm talking about because I took the classes.
Yeah.
So it's important.
Yeah. And we test you every year, I feel like, right?
I
We test
know.
you.
So
We make sure
I,
we keep on top of
yeah, I
it.
mean, I struggle keeping up with the updates, but I try. But yeah, you do. You get tested. You don't have to take the test every year, but you at
Yeah.
least have to sit through the classes. And why? It's like, okay, but because there's always updates.
Yeah.
It's always new. And that's one of the things that I love about it is it's always new. But the fact is that you have to keep up with the evolving industry. And you're able to do that with the National Alliance and the programs that you put on. So I think that it's important to have maybe you don't get all of the credentialing, but maybe you just go through the classes. You don't have to do, you
Yeah.
don't have to be a CIC necessarily to just take a class, and they're informative and they're great. So just a little plug for you.
Well, thank you. We certainly appreciate the plug. And grateful that you find it so helpful. We really do pride ourselves on the practical education piece of it, being able to take it right from classroom into work. And it, there's certainly some base theoretical stuff that always goes into insurance, but getting to speak with other folks that do it, understanding the policies, like you said, I was an underwriter in a former life, and it was one of my favorite things. Which maybe comes off a little weird when I say it like that. But
Yeah.
we really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of does it for our episode of Alliance Insights. We are so grateful that you spent this time with us and that we get to share your story with our audience, and hopes, without question, you will be inspiring folks in this industry and folks to come into this industry with with the conversation today. So I really appreciate that, and I don't say that to everybody.
Well, thanks. I
So thank
appreciate
you.
it. It was nice to talk to you too.
That's great. So check us out if you love this episode. Give it a like or whatever you do on the platform that you're watching or listening it on. Check us out on social media and certainly on our website, riskeducation.org. See you next time.